I don't believe men were created to be pawns in someone else's game. I believe we're created to be steward kings. Men under authority, yes, but entrusted with real responsibility. Not perfect men, but disciplined ones. Men who rule themselves, serve God directly, and refuse to live in fear. King, not pawn. Look, I think kindness is one of the most misunderstood virtues in our culture today. To some, it means never confronting, never offending anybody, always being agreeable, sometimes even lowering your standards just to keep the peace. And to others, especially men, reacting to that distortion, kindness, it feels like weakness, like a softness, like surrender. So they reject it entirely, but both sides, they misunderstand it because biblical kindness is not weakness. It's actually controlled strength towards someone else's good. So let's go ahead and talk about niceness versus kindness for a second. Separate these immediately. Niceness, well, it avoids tension. Kindness, it pursues restoration. Niceness, it'll keep everyone comfortable, like in the moment. But kindness, it will sometimes create discomfort. Niceness, it'll protect social approval or any approval for that matter. And kindness, well, instead it protects all the people involved. Niceness is more of like a social thing. Kindness, well, that's really more moral. And Jesus himself, he wasn't nice, he was actually kind. So imagine that somebody like disrespects you publicly, right? The easy reactions are obvious, retaliate, mock them, humiliate them, or it could be even to just withdraw. Sometimes maybe you're the type that wants to escalate. That's just instinct, okay? Kindness, it requires restraint, not because you're afraid, but because you're strong enough not to dominate. That's a very different level of masculinity. Kindness, it requires a self-control. It's impossible without it. You cannot be kind if your ego's fragile or your temper is left unchecked or you have a pride issue. Kindness means choosing measured response over emotional reaction. It means asking questions like, what produces the most good here? Not, how do I win in the moment? So look, Romans 2:4, it says, God's kindness is meant to lead you to repentance. Notice that. Not fear alone, not humiliation, not domination, kindness. See, God confronts sin, yes, but his posture towards the repentant is mercy. That combination, truth and mercy, is divine strength. And kindness itself, it's not a tolerance of evil, and we need to clarify that here because it doesn't mean that you approve of sin or you're excusing any form of dysfunction or even tolerating abuse. It doesn't even mean lowering your moral standards, okay? Kindness and holiness are not enemies. Kindness means your correction is motivated by simply just restoration, trying to fix something, not your ego and trying to be right all the time. And a man who enjoys punishing others, I would say he's not all that kind now, is he? A man who refuses to correct when needed, he's not kind either. He's just soft. And there's a moment where someone you care about, you'll notice is drifting. You could ignore it. You can gossip about it. You can judge silently, or you can sit down, speak clearly, not angrily, but clearly, not arrogantly, but firmly. Kindness, sometimes it does sound direct, but the aim with it is healing, and that's what we need to keep in mind. Harshness, I think, is often really just insecurity. Many men, they confuse harshness with strength. They'll speak sharply, they'll assert their dominance, they intimidate. But harshness, I think harshness, it often reveals this deep-rooted insecurity because a secure man, I think, he doesn't need to crush others to feel powerful. He can be firm without being cruel, and that's something I think we all can agree is rare. Think about it this way. You had Jesus and the woman that was, she was caught in the middle of adultery, right? So when the crowd wanted to stone the woman caught in adultery, Jesus, he didn't deny her sin, okay? But he also didn't join in on the mob. He simply just exposed the hypocrisy of it all. He extended mercy process. Then he told her, go and sin no more. See, kindness, It did not eliminate truth in that moment. Truth did not eliminate kindness either. That's what balance is. So, how does this look in leadership? Well, if you lead a family, if you lead a team, if you lead a business, maybe even a ministry at church, kindness will determine whether people grow under you or shrink around you. Fear based leadership, that creates a form of compliance. Kind leadership creates loyalty. Kindness does not remove standards, okay? It simply communicates that people are valued beyond their performance, which I don't think is asking for too much. You? Here's another thing I want you guys to think about. You've probably encountered two types of leaders in your life. One corrects publicly, the other humiliates casually and uses pressure constantly. The other corrects privately, encourages growth, and builds people deliberately. Both may get results, right? I'm not going to argue that. But only one creates strength in others. That's what kindness looks like in action. Another thing I want to go ahead and talk about here is being kind to your enemies. I think that's something that we all need to do a lot more of these days. And this is honestly where biblical kindness becomes radical. Jesus himself said to love your enemies. This doesn't mean to approve them. It doesn't even mean you have to agree with them. It just means that you refuse to dehumanize them. And that takes immense internal strength because retaliation, it feels powerful in the moment, right? And restraint, to its credit, it feels costly, like you're losing something, but it's restraint that builds character. And honestly, there's a lot of men who were never shown healthy kindness. So I don't blame them. They were either shown indulgence without boundaries or harshness without affection. So they swing between both extremes, right? But biblical masculinity, well, it integrates both strength and mercy because you can set boundaries, defend the truth, and protect the vulnerable while still being gentle in posture. Gentleness, again, it's not fragility like the culture wants to, perpetuate around us. It is simply power under control. And honestly, kindness is long term thinking. It thinks beyond the moment. It asks, what will this response produce in 5 years? Not, how do I win right now? See, cruelty, it may win arguments, but kindness, it wins trust. And trust multiplies influence. So why does culture today, I've brought up culture a couple times now, why does it struggle with kindness? Well, it's because we live in an age of outrage. Sarcasm is rewarded, mockery is normalized, public humiliation is a form of entertainment now. Kindness, it feels slow in that environment, but fruit always grows more slowly, and what grows slowly lasts. So, where does kindness begin? I would argue that it begins with inner stability, because if you're constantly agitated, you're going to struggle with kindness. Kindness flows from peace, from patience, from security in your own identity. It is a fruit of the Spirit, not a personality preference. And without the Spirit forming you, kindness becomes performance. So again, as we close out here, kindness is not weakness. It is strength restrained for the sake of restoration. It is correction without cruelty and firmness without humiliation. It's simply just mercy without compromise. So be the kind of man whose strength makes others safer, not smaller, because the world has enough harsh men. What it lacks are strong men who know how to wield power with kindness.